Join the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link September 20th at noon Eastern for a free call-in lunch and learn regarding pediatric cancer and blood cancer updates as we commemorate Blood Cancer Awareness Month. We'll focus on supportive, patient-centered care, collaboration, and innovative ways to serve pediatric patients and their families, as well as new treatments which will help lower the risk of graft versus host disease, or GVHD. To sign up for free, visit nbmtlink.org or visit the link in our show notes. Welcome to Marrow Masters Season 11, sponsored by the Leukemia and Lymphoma Society and Sanofi. The National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, established in 1992, strives to help patients, caregivers, and families cope with the psychosocial challenges of bone marrow and stem cell transplant from diagnosis through survivorship. Season 11 of our show focuses on thriving in survivorship. Here's your host, Executive Director of the NBMT Link, Peggy Burkhart.
Welcome, everyone. Today we have Sharde Fultz of Michigan with us. So Sharde was one of our first podcasters several years ago, and we wanted to catch up with Sharde and learn more about how she's doing today. I assure you that you will be inspired and feel like you've made a new friend today, like I did so many years ago. Hello, Sharde. Thank you for being with us today.
Hi, Peggy. I'm so happy to be here.
Oh, good. I'm so looking forward to this. So, Sharde, let's fill everyone in on your diagnosis and a bit about your bone marrow transplant story.
So I was diagnosed my freshman year of college. It was October of 2009, and I was diagnosed with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. It was difficult to stage, but if we had to, we could say it was between like stage 3, 4. It was pretty intense. There was a mass in my chest the size of a small watermelon. At that time, I was a dance major. My goal was to dance with Alvin Ailey one day, or Colors, or all the cool modern dance groups, and travel the world. And I was actually away at school living in the dorms, and it turned out that I had some issues with financial aid I had scholarships and things to cover my academics, but they wouldn't cover the dorms. Things just got a bit messy. Anyway, I had to leave that school and come back home and go to community college. And during that time, I got very ill. And I was also working during that time as a home health aide. So I worked a lot of midnight shifts, really weird hours. And I was sleeping sporadically, if you will, but it felt normal to me because I worked weird hours. However, my mom picked up on it, and she's like, you haven't quite been the same. You're sleeping weird. And she noticed a few other weird things going on. And then I developed a really intense cough, more like a bark. It was like if a werewolf could cough. It was like shaking the house. I thought I just caught a bug, and also I'm a dancer. It's like, we don't get sick. We might get sick for a couple of days, whatever. So I didn't take it seriously. And at one point, I developed a mass on my clavicle, and I woke up one morning, and it was almost like the left side of my neck was connected to my shoulder. It was quite big.
Oh, wow.
I turned to my mom like, oh my gosh, what's going on? And mind you, for weeks before this, she was telling me I needed to go to the doctor or go to ER, but, I thought I was grown, and I'm like, it's not important, blah, blah, blah. And she was trying to respect that. But after the mass on my clavicle showed up, I was pretty convinced that I should go to a doctor. And so I went to one of those like urgent care.
Okay.
And I was misdiagnosed. So I'm trying to keep a long story a little shorter. Basically, it took a few visits. I had to get some scans done. And when I finally got to the point where I was at a hospital, not an urgent care, they thought I had TB. So I honestly probably had a couple misdiagnoses before they actually diagnosed me with non-Hodgkin's lymphoma. Nevertheless, I always think about the fact that I was really hurt having to leave school that first time, which wasn't due to cancer reasons, the whole financial weird stuff.
Sure.
But had I not been home and going to community college, I really would not, I can't imagine a world where it would have had to get really, really bad before I went to a doctor, as opposed to my mom seeing the changes and urging me and slightly annoying me until the point where I saw a doctor.
But mom does know best.
Exactly. So, I mean, it ultimately saved my life. I'm sure if I was still at school and, the whole clavicle thing, I'd be like, oh, but even still, I'm sure it would have been a very different experience if I wasn't at home. So it's bittersweet. Yeah, it sucked having to leave, but I think everything happens for a reason.
Absolutely. Tell us about your treatment and life right after treatment.
So I started treatment immediately since the mass was pretty aggressive. I had chemotherapy. It's hard to remember how many rounds. Everything happens in such a blur, but
Sure.
I received chemotherapy treatment. I received radiation therapy. So the chemo did really well, but it didn't quite get the mass, completely gone. And then radiation shrunk it to as far as it possibly could. And ultimately, my specialists and doctors decided it would be best for me to pursue a bone marrow transplant.
Okay.
We originally were hoping it would be an autologous transplant, but we ended up needing an allogeneic transplant.
Okay.
So I started treatment in 2009, and I had chemo, radiation, and it was 2011, February of 2011, that I received my allogeneic bone marrow transplant. And during that time, trying to kind of reflect on what was going on in those years, I was, even though, and I'll rewind back to chemotherapy, so forgive me if I'm going like, woo, woo.
That's okay.
I just had some memories come back. At the start of it all, chemotherapy, I was at home under my mom's care. She was doing everything for me. I felt like a bomb had just crashed into my universe. Everything had to stop. School had to stop. Of course, no more home health aid. I was the one who needed a health aid.
Yeah.
I felt very lonely at that time and like an outsider. So me being the, extroverted type of person I am, I really did take to the internet and try to find organizations and what's out there for young adults and all that sort of stuff. So during some of the early years of treatment, when I was well enough, I really did dive into the cancer community, the young adult cancer community, and using the internet to find resources. And outside of the times where I was like attempting to go to conferences and retreats and things like that, I also attempted to be a quote unquote normal person.
Sure.
So yeah, I attempted to go back to school, and that was extremely rough. This is definitely one of the things, if I could tell someone who's going through their cancer journey as a young adult at present. And my family said this, and my mom said this as well. And I think I thought I was doing it, but as far as being patient and giving the process time, and also just knowing your resources, because I attempted to go back to school and it wasn't too strenuous on my body. I took my time as far as like the labor of classes and things of that sort, but I didn't know my resources. And so when I would get sick or find that I needed to go to the hospital, I didn't know of the resources available, like disability services,
Okay.
so that I could receive the support that I needed. So that made the educational track, if you will, very long and laborious, because this probably went on for perhaps the first 5 years of me attempting to get back to school through treatment. A bit of a struggle with attempting to keep up with classes, getting sick, having chronic illness, and having to learn my way through mistakes as far as what my options are as a disabled individual. So that's just a little tangent.
Sure. No, that's important to know.
Yeah, that's kind of early cancer treatment was oh, can I do things? Let me see what I can do while I'm still getting chemo.
Sure.
And like running around with my bald head, trying to do club hopping and go to school and date. Like,
Yep.
I think at that time, I just so badly still wanted to be a young adult doing things.
Yes.
And it wasn't, too bad. There were some things I could do, some things I had to learn the hard way and take time for myself and things like that. I believe things got more intense when it came to bone marrow transplant time. I don't believe I was fully mentally prepared for the amount of strength it would take.
Okay.
I knew it wasn't going to be a walk in the park, but it was definitely, ironically, took much less time than the course of treatment for chemotherapy. The actual bone marrow transplant in itself, if you include like the hospitalization and prep, the actual transplant, I was possibly in the hospital a few days, but, there's recovery time and all that jazz. And the time for finding out whether or not my graft versus host disease was chronic or was it not chronic, I remember that being pretty painstaking because I had heard all these horror stories about chronic GVHD, and the nurses were all rooting that it wasn't chronic. So like, oh, it'll be great. It'll mean like the cells are working, but you don't have it chronically, and that means you won't have to deal with this the rest of your life. Trying to cheer me up, but at the end of the day, there was no telling whether or not, at that moment, how intense a diagnosis it would be for me. So ultimately, it was chronic GVHD, and I believe when I refer to not knowing the scope or intensity of what the bone marrow transplant would mean to my life, that's perhaps, and not perhaps, for sure, what I'm really referring to. I didn't know how much the graft versus host disease would have an impact on the rest of my entire life. I really thought the bone marrow transplant was just going to be another phase, another phase in the journey, another chapter in my story. But it turned out that it was actually some of the beginning of a whole new book that's still in writing.
Of a chronic illness. And you've really struggled with the GVHD, haven't you?
Mm-hmm.
Does it change and ebb and flow for you, Sharde? Does it present differently, different times?
It does. Thanks for asking that. I think chronic GVHD for sure is so unique. I find that there are some symptoms that are just there all the time and thankfully are manageable with medications. For example, the chronic GVHD in my mouth and my eyes, those are just a daily symptom that I have to manage. And it kind of refers to just like sores in the mouth and dryness. Oh gosh, my eyes are always dry.
Sure.
And my mouth gets dry. And it's pretty, honestly, I don't know if I'm just so used to it after all these years or if it actually is easy to manage. But when we talk about ebb and flow, when I was first diagnosed with chronic GVHD and actually still in the hospital recuperating from the bone marrow transplant, I got a really bad case of C. diff. And I believe the C. diff was a result of the graft versus host disease in my intestines, amongst other things, but it didn't help that I had GVHD. And before actually being diagnosed, they had to do an emergency exploratory surgery to find out what the deal was with my stomach because I was in the hospital telling the nurses I was in pain and the doctors about this intense pain I was having. And they treated it honestly, they were putting a Band-Aid over it for a while.
Okay.
And I was in agony, and it took my mother, she had to, in so many words, bless some people out to do something, to really pay some serious attention to what was going on with me. And that's the only way that I got taken seriously. Like, I don't know what I would have done if my mom wasn't there to advocate for me because I've grown out of this, but especially at that time, I wouldn't say I was soft-spoken, but I sort of just held this reverence for people in positions of authority and such, So,
Yeah.
so I really needed my mom to advocate for me that way. And that's, I think, one of the most profound instances within my personal experience of experiencing that bias that some medical professionals can have towards Black people, people of color, when it comes to instances of pain and being regarded and taken seriously within the medical field or within these situations. Because, I mean, even though I had that like reverence and was a little soft spoken, I kept saying like, no, this is bad. Someone needs to da 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 da. And I'm not the type of person to raise hell. And honestly, my mom is a very sweet woman, but she's got lots of years on me and she knows the system.
She's a fierce mama bear.
And she's a mom.
Yep.
Period. Exactly. So she saved my life.
No.
I just want to shine a light that really is a major issue within our systems. And I've witnessed it myself, and it is systemic. And I feel really honored to have this moment to shine a light on that. So shout out to moms and to change.
And to you. So
thank you.
Let's share with our listeners how you, of course, we know you would have been an amazing dancer, but that was not going to be what happened. What prompted you to want to go back to school and change gears to really help people like yourself that were going through this?
Oh, gosh. Let's see. I had to realize, as I said, the cancer experience can be extremely isolating, for sure. And like you said, dance, it still is my passion. It's like, it's what pumps through my veins. I love it so much. But I had to learn that it's okay to embrace my other gifts and the other things that I enjoy to do and just sort of seek out how far I can go with them. So personally, I was never unaware that I could do other things. And I understand if that's not everyone's story. It's just the way I grew up and the way my family reared me. It's like, you can do whatever you want,
Terrific.
And I just happened to fall in love with dance very early on and was so focused on that. I really did have a bit of an identity crisis when I found out that it's likely I wouldn't be on stage again or able to even take classes. And that's something that I still grieve today. But within just the process of experience and the whole journey, if you will, I did have to learn about the other things that bring me a sense of feeling fulfilled and things that I love to do. And how can I nurture that and cultivate that since I can't dance anymore? So, as I said before, I definitely dived into the cancer community and I felt such a sense of love and acceptance and just solidarity in that. And also dealing with my own illnesses and my younger sister who has a rare genetic disorder, seeing her experiences within the medical system, I could see the difference between when there's representation and there's a professional helping us out that understands our background and our culture and the heart that they put. Not that other professionals don't have those things in mind, but there is a difference when someone can connect with you that way. And having experienced that, it really pricked my heart and made me want to be that for someone else. So I found social work to be a good avenue to switch over to because, one, it's extremely marketable. Social work could just be anywhere, and I like having choices. But ultimately, I love helping people in any way I can and being able to be there for someone and to imagine being able to be that special person for a person of color who has been delved into this other world suddenly and their whole life has changed. To be able to come and help them and say, I see you, I understand the struggles, and here is how I can help you. I really like the idea of that. So that's one of the reasons I chose social work. But I think there are so many cool things about the field that just kind of flow with my personality because I'm not even sure I'd be in a hospital setting. But again, I like options.
Yeah, you don't have to be in just a hospital setting. Let's talk about some of the conferences and retreats that you're a part of. That sounds so exciting.
Oh, gosh. Okay. We're going to get into the Wayback Machine. The very first retreat that I went on, well, not quite a retreat. I went to a conference with this organization called Next Step. And at the time, the conference was in Philly. And the big reveal is I work for them now. So I'll say
great.
we.
I didn't know that. Terrific.
Yeah. we call them conferences because it's a mix between a camp and a conference. So we want like the fun and excitement of camp, the laughs and those sorts of memories, but also the educational aspect and resourcefulness that you'd get from going to any sort of conference that you would typically think of. So years, many moons ago, back in possibly this was 2010, I went to a Next Step conference, and it was just a major eye-opener for me. And this isn't a plug. This is really, truly my experience. And it was my first time away from home as a cancer patient or survivor or thriver, because 2010, that was before even the bone marrow transplant. So that was eye-opening and helped me realize there is a community out there. And then from Next Step, there are some local programs in Michigan, such as like the Cassie Hines Shoes Cancer Foundation. They helped pay for my flights and transportation to a bunch of these conferences and retreats.
They're incredible.
Oh, yeah. So I've been to retreats with Stupid Cancer. I've gone to First Ascents. I went to Camp Make a Dream. Peggy, I was all over the place.
I love it.
I said, I need to get something out of this crappy experience.
And you did.
Yeah, I really did.
We'll put some of these organizations in the show notes too, so others can look them up.
Oh, please do.
Yeah.
And yeah, ultimately, the way that ended up to where I am today is after that initial experience with Next Step. And I went back to them a few times after that first one. And then there were maybe 5 years or so where I had just been doing quite a bit of public speaking and stayed involved with the cancer community and just trying to grow as a person. I was still doing my back and forth in school. And Next Step reached out and said that they needed a facilitator for their young adult cancer conference.
Oh, great.
And it was so trippy because I felt I still hadn't realized how much I had grown and was seeing myself through this lens of the sick girl who hasn't finished college and doesn't have a job. And
sure.
You know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
I wasn't wandering around super self-deprecating, but they saw something in me that I had not yet seen in myself. So it was a major opportunity, and I was a bit nervous, hoping that I was ready. But the fact that they believed in me helped me believe in me.
Absolutely.
And so I started off as the young adult conference facilitator, and this was in 2018. And then at the start of the pandemic, when everything went virtual, they asked me to facilitate the conferences for all the communities.
Oh, wow.
So now I am the conference
spokesperson,
conference director.
Oh, that's terrific.
Yeah, it's been awesome.
Are you still doing that today?
I am.
Oh, great. So, Sharde, let's talk about your best tips for people that are maybe on the beginning of the journey, all the things you've learned. I know you've already shared the major importance of advocacy and speaking up for yourself and recognizing when something's wrong. What would you say to folks just to give them some hope to get through all of this?
Oh, gosh. My most cherished piece of advice that I could give someone who's in the community or going through this struggle in any way, I think this can apply to loved ones and caregivers just as much as the individual, who is in treatment. Time. One really has to reevaluate their perception of time and what it means to oneself and how you want to cherish it and your expectations. So the memory that I often go back to is when I was first diagnosed and nurses were attempting to be encouraging, but they're like, oh, you have non-Hodgkin's lymphoma, you're young, this is going to come and go and you'll be back to a regular life before you know it.
Okay.
And gosh, Peggy, when I tell you, as someone who had never been in this sort of experience, I held on to every word they said desperately. And I just needed that to be the truth. Like this, it's the only thing that made sense to me because these medical professionals said it and they must know.
Sure.
So when several months later, maybe a year and a half later, who knows, when I realized this wasn't going to be a short thing or this wasn't going to be an easy recovery, I went through a bout of depression because I was so hurt and distraught at the idea that my life was forever changed. When they said you'll be back to normal, it gave me no semblance of this changing my life forever. And I was young and naive, so I encourage folk to, even though people have very good intentions and want to be encouraging from the outside, and they might say things like, hey, this will be over before you know it, or I advise that you cross each bridge as it comes and just give yourself time to be in the moment, wherever your body is, wherever you are medically, wherever you are emotionally, and know that wherever you are in that moment doesn't have to be forever. And that you're creating, we're all in the midst of trudging our own way through the muck or the river or whatever works best for you. A river's probably prettier, right? But there's no cookie cutter. There's no cutout for life. There's no, I believe we're reared and society gives us the impression that these are the milestones, these are the steps. But especially going through an experience like this, you really have to accept that your path is not going to be like the status quo, and that is okay. So learning to not compare yourself to other folks, which is something everyone
absolutely
has to learn throughout life, but you're forced to learn it pretty quickly or to practice it very quickly when you receive a diagnosis like this or you find that you have chronic illness. So that's my main bit of advice, just to reevaluate how you perceive time and stay in the moment and just accept that sometimes things, whatever that thing is within this process, sometimes it takes a while, but we're humans, we're resilient, we adapt. It's just inevitable. We can't help but adapt.
I like that.
You got to trust in things like that. Yeah.
Trust the system.
Right. Trust the system, the body system.
Yes. Oh, Sharde, this is so great. It's so wonderful to hear from you again and to know that you're doing so well and helping people in all that you do. And I know when we had our GVHD day last spring, you just wrote the most beautiful note about feeling so validated. And it was just so inspirational to so many people as we shed more of a light on GVHD and what it is like to live with, but just how you kind of ebb and flow and roll with it all and have that beautiful smile on your face.
Oh, gosh.
we really appreciate you and the message you bring to survivorship. You're thriving on your time. That's all we can ask and want. And I'm, for one, I'm so proud of you.
Oh, gosh, Peggy, thank you.
I love having you back to give us an update on where you are. And we wish you all the best as you continue. Any parting words, anything we didn't cover that you want to say before we wrap things up?
Oh, my goodness. Well, one, thank you for all those wonderful words. Oh, my goodness. I thought GVHD Day was just spectacular. I won't wax poetic about it, but I just want to highlight that I really was honored and felt so seen that this was something we could celebrate together and just acknowledge and bring awareness to. And I think one thing I'd add, and it kind of adds to that concept of how we perceive time, but I really do want to urge people to prioritize the time that they take for themselves as well, their care, their loved ones. I believe every moment is just so precious and life gets so busy that we get hung up on how we're going to pay the bills, which is important. Or perhaps it's who's going to watch the kids or whatever that thing is. But we only get one life. We only get one body. Even if that body comes with a lot of stuff going on, we really need to treasure every moment with the people and the memories that matter most to us. So I encourage people to do that. And even if it's just take a nap. If you're tired, take a nap, please.
I'm glad you said
Those
that.
things are important.
That is so important for people to realize. You're not lazy if you take a nap.
Exactly.
You're listening to your body. You're doing what you need to do to be well and have a great day.
Absolutely.
Oh, Sharde, it's just so great to see you and keep up the great work.
So good to see you too. I'm so honored that you asked me to join you today, sincerely. And know that you can call me anytime and I'm dropping stuff to be with you.
Oh, Sharde, thank you. Take care of yourself, okay?
You too, Peggy. Thanks so much.
This has been the Marrow Masters podcast. If you know someone who would benefit from the information in our show, please share this episode with them. And don't miss future episodes of our show. Follow Marrow Masters on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube, or wherever you're listening right now. And to connect with the National Bone Marrow Transplant Link, visit nbmtlink.org or follow the link in our show notes.